I talked to you about a week ago, Miss Day, about this
Mhm.
role for the celebration of Black cinema,
Yes.
and you mentioned something that really stuck with me. That you felt like so invested that it was hard to get out of the role of Billie Holiday.
Yeah.
Was there a mourning period for you after
Huge.
the shoot that you went through?
Huge. It was like divorce. It was like mourning, losing a family member, losing a loved one. I mean, it was losing yourself, because all I had known up to that point for a good 2-year period was Lady, And so I think it was a mourning period that to be completely frank with you, I am just now starting to feel a little more balanced, you know what I mean? And starting to feel like I'm discovering now who I'm supposed to be, I think, in this season, and there will definitely be remnants of her there always, but yeah, I was brokenhearted. I was not ready to leave. I've been randomly looking at properties in Montreal to somehow tap back into like a crazy person, to somehow tap back to what, Lee and I had on set, my co-stars and I had on set, and just what I had with her on set, her and I shared, and our relationship and our love and commingling of our spirits. It was incredibly challenging, and probably the most challenging thing. Ultimately ended up being the most challenging thing.
Now, during this press conference, Mr. Daniels, and I hate to rat you out here, Miss Day, you went on in great detail about how Mr. Daniels had to persuade you that you were going to be the person for this role, and that how you were resistant to the idea. Now, I guess my question to you, now that you've heard this part of the story, Mr. Daniels, is what did you see in Miss Day that you just knew that had to be her?
Well, after you put it like that, a con artist, I guess, huh?
I didn't say that. I was like, no. No.
Let me tell you something. She didn't want it. She really didn't want it. I think that she wanted it, but she didn't want it.
Well, and he didn't want it.
I didn't want her. Yeah, exactly. I think it was a combination. It was I told you, it was a bad wind. And that made us together. I think that she questioned herself. I know I questioned myself even whether I wanted to do this movie, because I really wanted to make sure that the movie I was doing was an honest account of Billie Holiday. And it's after watching Lady Sings the Blues, that's hard. It was hard, but we met. It was a tango. We met and it was beautiful. We talked each other into it. So
yeah.
And then look at her. There was no question you could not hire her.
I think your two characters are probably the two most important characters in the film, and here's why. Because you both represent two ends of the spectrum in which that society was kind of dealing with in terms of race relations. You've got government on one side, Mr. Hedlund, and you're just doing anything that you can to oppress African Americans. And then your character, Mr. Ross, was basically seeking to appease on some level because that's what you thought was necessary to survive. Did you guys see it? Did you guys see it that way, or am I just reading too much into your characters?
No, that's. I think that in a lot of senses. Well, at least in my relationship with Anslinger and what was going on, I think that was a huge thing, because at that time, I'm sure a lot of young Black men chose to do that same thing, because how scary it probably was to even decide to go against what was wrong, and at the same time having a family and wanting opportunity and seizing it, even knowing that it was in harm of someone just like you. So it was it's an interesting thing. I think nowadays you still see where it's speaking out is still at times scary, and having to do it back then must have been on a whole nother level, and dangerous too. So
in my research of Harry Anslinger, there were many articles that labeled him as a massive racist, as a massive bigot. He's a huge representation of that time. He was in my opinion, a very malicious man. And throughout all of his careers, he always had some sort of crazy ulterior motive. You know, he came into the Federal Bureau of Narcotics sort of essentially with his tail between his legs. He'd been involved in the prohibition. He failed. His wife's uncle, who was the United States Secretary of Treasury, granted him $100,000 to formulate the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He wanted this to be it. And even though his opinions and views on the negative effects of even so much as marijuana were next to nil before he formulated the bureau, they changed dramatically afterwards. He maliciously used Billie as an example of his opposing views on Black jazz musicians, drugs addicts, and the lyrics to her song "Strange Fruit." He was obsessed with arresting her because of that, and still he continued on to work in this position under Truman, Hoover, Eisenhower, and Kennedy. I think the fact that he wasn't even this part of Billie's story wasn't even explained in Lady Sings the Blues is really just because he was still alive. So it was a very powerful thing to be a part of this film to explain that side of it. It was an educational experience for me, and I hope it's going to be an educational experience for many generations to come, not only in history but in music and the artists we are inspired by for traumatic and beautiful ways.
Thank you.
Well, here's my take on both your characters, because I have some thoughts. I think you two are as important, if not more important, than say even the antagonist in this narrative, and I'll tell you why. Because you two represent her humanity, who she was, who she surrounded herself with, and I think that it speaks to the type of person Billie was. Now, am I just an overbearing, overthinking critic, or am I onto something? I'll take both your answers.
Something, my friend. You're on. That's very astute of you. I'm glad that that makes me happy as an actor that came across.
Yeah.
Now, is this a type of project when you're offered, you immediately say yes, or did you have to read what it was, or did you just see Lee Daniels and you were like, sold?
I mean, it's all those things. I always just, for sake of, I just want to know all of what's going on. So I always read the script. But of course, Lee doing another biopic is always, I really enjoy history, and especially any opportunity to tell or retell our history, I'm down for. But no, when I read the script, I knew this was going to be an extremely special project, especially with all the people being involved.
Yeah, same here. I read the script, and I learned more about Billie Holiday reading the script. I was even more moved by who she was and her story. And then to add a cherry on top, I learned about Miss Freddie, and who knew that there was a openly gay Black, courageous queen back in the day like that. You know what I mean? Back in the late 40s and 50s. And so that it was a no-brainer for me once I saw that.
Well, you gave visibility to something that may have been invisible to someone like myself, and it opened my eyes to more of her history, and your performances really, enhanced that legacy of Billie Holiday. Did you feel pressure on set during filming this because you knew what you were up against and the history and just what it meant to so many people?
I wouldn't say pressure. I felt honored to do so, and I felt a responsibility, and I was excited at the opportunity and chance to, in some way, leave a footprint and revealing who these people were. But it was in a pressure cooker type of situation, and also everyone was in it. So I think that helped, and the level of tenacity and her relentless work ethic really set a standard for all of us. So it was just a really intense but enjoyable, very rewarding experience journey that we took.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, there was no, there was no pressure. There was no fear. It was just full of excitement. It was excitement. That was what I felt. I felt a lot of excitement and like Davine said, responsibility. A responsibility to make sure that this story gets told to the best of our abilities, and that's what it deserves. But also a responsibility to make sure that our lead, Andra, was taken care of, because she was giving so much, and we wanted to make sure that she was okay. And in doing that, I think that is where you got kind of this organic energy that that transferred through the screen.
Is this the type of film, when you read it, the type of narrative when you went through it, that you literally would have picked any role possible just to be part of this experience?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent. To a certain extent, this is like what I call a purpose project. Naturally we have to, consider the financial of it all and, live our lives. But this is the thing that, when I started working, this is what I wanted to do. These are the stories that I wanted to tell. So when a script this good comes across your desk, you're like, yeah, whatever Lee wants me to do, I'll be there.
Yeah, man. It's an extension of that, just being able to work with such a great script, and then also beautiful artists like Andra and Tyler and obviously Lee. That's pretty much what it's about for me, getting in the space with people like that and creating something beautiful.
This question's for both of you. What do you think is the turning point in this film for your respective characters? I have a theory about your character, Mr. Rhodes, but I'm kind of torn about yours, Mr. Williams. I would be interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's a major turning point that happens in, what I've dubbed the biggest breakup scene ever, where Billy decides to leave everybody on the side of the road, including Jimmy Fletcher.
Right. Yes.
That's, it's a place that, sets them up for a really tragic end. That's unfortunate. Billy and Lester died 4 months apart. And from what we understand, they didn't have much communication in those 4 months. To the point where she wasn't even able to really sing at the funeral. So I think us trying to capture that moment of when did it sever, what was too much, and what broke, and what it ultimately broke both of them.
Mr. Rhodes, your character?
I think for Jimmy it was kind of a snowball effect, but it was this culmination of just really having the opportunity to see what Billy's life was like. I think whenever he did drugs with them for the first time, and then really went into that moment when he got to see her life, I think that really changed his perspective on not just her and the situation that he was in, but his understanding of Black life around him.
See, I got his right, but I got yours wrong. That bothers me.
What did you think? What did you think?
I thought Jimmy's turning point was that conversation where he was told he did it the wrong way. He went about it the wrong way, and that sat really sat with me. Like you could see, you got this look on your face, like, really? So I am being played. I mean, do you think that's where Jimmy kind of figures it out, or we'll end on that.
We'll end on that, but no, man. I think it takes. I really think it takes seeing somebody else's situation rather than like messing up. Because I've messed up a couple times in my life, and I've continued to mess up down that road until I saw something that really showed me that this is probably not where I should be, or probably not what I should be doing, or this is the wrong interpretation of what this is, essentially. So for me, that's what that was.